Good evening, I hope you're doing well. This is my new channel. I felt like it was time for me to add my voice to the current political struggle. Look at exploring options with you guys as to how we can do battle in a new paradigm. I think the basic thrust of what I want to put across to you guys is that the old world in which Western nations traditionally had a white majority, an overwhelming white majority, and were considered to be white nations, whatever the word white means, but they were ethnically homogenous nations. Like, that era is over. And I think, broadly speaking, in the past, our governments, at least ostensibly, they were imperfect, but they more or less served or were compelled to serve the interests of the people. That is no longer the case. So we are a people now who are rapidly being demographically destroyed. So we are a put upon and beleaguered group with no leaders or political representation. We have very few options with which to fight our captors. So we speak, and I think I say that deliberately. I think we are being held by captors. We live in essentially what is an open air tax farm in which we are exploited by force in order to extract resources from us, in order to the people who hate us can redistribute those resources to our enemies and then also use those resources to attack us. They maintain the pretense that this is not the case and essentially rule by gaslighting. What I want to do, and what the main thrust of what I wanted to start this channel for, was to change people's mindsets. I think you need to stop thinking that we live in a country which is being poorly run, because I thought what you have to accept is that we are prisoners of war. And as such, it's incumbent upon us to create a doctrine by which we approach this world that we live in. And that is to say that we have to give the absolute minimum amount of energy that we possibly can to our enemies. That's how we spend money. And that's, importantly, is how we also deal with things like taxation and purchasing goods. And I think we have to have a completely new mindset. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be politically active. I think we have to have our voice out there. But I think we also have to accept that we're probably not going to be able to elect someone who's going to do some miracle fix and reverse things. I think, and a lot of channels out there have touched upon this. This system will eventually destroy itself because it is ultimately an evil system, and the things that they're doing are not sustainable. There is that, but we also need to accept that we are a conquered people. We have been beaten in a war, which most of us were completely unaware we were fighting. We lost. We are now captives in the United Kingdom. And we need to do what we're going to do. We're still here. White people are not going anywhere. We're still alive, even though our countries are being swamped and we are being carved up like a roast and all of our resources extracted to benefit our enemies. We're still here, and we still need to figure out a way that we can thrive and survive and be and importantly as well, be as difficult to destroy as possible. And what I'm going to do is go over some ideas and some philosophical tenets that we might be wise to start incorporating into our daily lives, some ways to live. And I'm going to set up a Discord channel as well, so perhaps I can act as a conduit for people to join this discussion, start figuring out how best we take on the state. Because ultimately, right, what are our options? We can't vote our way out of this. We've tried that nearly 2 generations. We have been trying to vote people in who would represent our interests and, in fact, stop trying to destroy our country and our way of life. That has not succeeded. It will not succeed in the future, I do not believe. Caveat that with that we still need to be involved in the political process. We still need to have our voices heard. But I don't think we can realistically expect some kind of victory. And what are the other options? Well, there's the V word, isn't there? You pick up a weapon. Well, that's not really going to be particularly clever either. And I'm not one of these people who would say to you, right, I completely abhor violence. I would say, right, it's not wise to be violent because we can't win. I think that if violence was a viable option, it would be a good option, but it's not. So we have to figure out how to fight this system, and also how to live within this system, this evil system, which wants to destroy us, and our ultimately victory is going to be not be destroyed. So with that in mind, with that note, that bombshell, what I'd like to maybe just go over briefly in the first of many videos would be maybe a discussion on how are prisoners of war expected to behave. So I want to ram it into your head. You don't live in a country anymore. You're a captive in an enemy's country. And perhaps we can storm the gates, storm the fences, and retake the place maybe in the future. But at the moment, we are captives. We need to accept that we are captives, and we need to start acting in our own collective best interest. And it's along similar lines to how a prisoner of war would be expected to behave. So I think that's a useful thing to potentially discuss. You'll see all this text on the screen in the background. So I was going to maybe just see and maybe just explore the parallels between our situation and what your situation might be like if you were captured in one of these financiers' international banking wars by the enemy of the week. So the first, just I put into Grok, like just asking it for some, like what are British soldiers who are captured advised to do as per military doctrine? Okay, right, so if you're captured as a British soldier, you must compel the enemy to adhere to the Geneva Convention. Obviously that's not applicable to our situation, but I mean in a sense it is. I think we have to start insisting that we are treated fairly. We need to resist any attempts to other us. We need to not accept things like two-tier justice. You know, having our people put to the back of the line when it comes to communal benefits like social housing benefits, things of that nature. We're allowed to kick up a fuss, even as a prisoner. As a prisoner of war, we can kick up a fuss and protect our own interest. Attempt to, within the framework of being a prisoner, attempt to look after our own interests as best as possible. And that means that we shout as loud as we possibly can to make sure that we're not shunted into second place and that we are treated humanely by our captors as far as possible. We must resist exploitation. Soldiers are instructed to resist enemy attempts to exploit them for propaganda, intelligence, or indoctrination. This includes avoiding actions that could harm fellow prisoners or their nation, such as giving statements or signing documents that could be used against the UK or allies. I think maybe I'm going to get a bit esoteric with making a parallel with this, but I think this is an extremely important, maybe the most important point is that we have to resist exploitation. We have to basically draw a line in the sand and hold it as best as we possibly can. Now, understand that there's hundreds of thousands, millions of people flooding into our country every year. Our government not only is indifferent to this, it is enabling this process of our demographic destruction and replacement. We have to resist it so we're being exploited, we're being torn up by the roots, and we have to resist that exploitation. And that comes a lot of ways, and I think we can get into individual discussions, ways of resisting exploitation as we go, but it's going to involve quite a lot of things. We have to stop frequenting foreign businesses. Nothing against any individuals. We don't have any problems with any individuals. In fact, I don't think I need to explain to anyone who's watching this to this point that racism is not something that we need to be worried about any longer as a people. We have nothing against individuals, but we have to protect our own interests. So we should not frequent foreign businesses, which enable our resources going to foreign people who can then bring in more foreign people to displace us. I don't think we should engage in any occupations which enable the state bureaucracy. Like, for example, if you're a prisoner of war and you were recruited as one of the prisoner guards, you'd be considered to be, probably not the best human being. I think that's applicable here. You know, if you join the police force and you become the hands of the state, and you know maybe they're moving foreign invaders into like a local hotel or something like that, and you're the one who is standing between the invaders and the people who live there who don't want to be invaded. If we could stop being the right arm of the state, then we could essentially make neuter the state. So if you're in an occupation which is enacting, like for example, if you're a bureaucrat who is enacting these council house housing redistribution schemes to asylum seekers, or you're a policeman who's going around arresting people for posting things on Twitter or any of these things, it's a choice. You don't need to be doing that to make a living. You could do something else. And I think as a people collectively we should. Or if we're going to be in those occupations, we have to look to subvert them and do things which protect our interests from within those occupations. Like for example, you could imagine a scenario where, like in a prisoner of war camp, let's say you take a role as a guard in the prisoner of war camp, right? And then maybe you help your people. You know, you make sure that they get the best of the available rations, potentially even help with escape attempts. You know, so I'm kind of trying to get people to think along those lines. Like these institutions now should only exist as far as we can exploit them for our own benefit. And if you go into a job such as a policeman and you do things such as arrest people, arrest mums for complaining about schools, or you know these things. You've seen all these news stories, right? I don't need to go through that stuff with you. You've seen it all, right? So if you're a part of the state bureaucracy, which is enabling and enacting these dictates, you have a choice to refuse to do that. And I think that is your moral obligation as a prisoner of war, is not to betray your own people and not to enable the state bureaucracy. I don't think we should be selling property to foreigners. I don't think we should be renting our houses if we're landlords to foreigners. These are things that we can control, that are well within our remit. I said that the resisting exploitation was the most important point, but maybe there is a more important point. We shouldn't be giving our labour to the state. You know, if you're a prisoner of war, you know, prisoners of war were made to build the bridge over the River Kwai, a construction project. And if you can avoid doing that, that's good because it benefits your people and it's bad for the state. We shouldn't be giving them money at every juncture. And I think I would go as far as to say, right, if you own a business, we shouldn't be returning taxes to the government. You should be trying to do as much as you can under the table. It's every pound, every dollar, every euro, whatever, that goes to the state is money which is going to be used to... I mean, I think we should stop beating about the bush with it as well. It's ethnic cleansing. What they are attempting, what the governments in the West are attempting to do to us is ethnic cleansing. And we can tirade about how crazy we are about it, like, oh, they're all mad, they're all insane. It's not, they know exactly what they're doing. They're attempting to ethnic cleanse us. So every pound that we don't give them is a pound that they cannot use to destroy us, undermine us, annihilate our way of living. So we need to stop giving them money at every avenue we possibly can. Now, I know we're prisoners of war. We have to do what we have to do to survive. And that may involve, you know, being forced to, like, for example, you go to the shops to buy your groceries. You obviously have to pay value-added tax on things that you buy. But if you make a maximal effort to avoid giving them money as far as possible, whether that be buying things for cash from local producers, or just even living frugally, you know, going to the shop, the store, and buying as little as possible, so that you're minimising the amount of your output which is going to the state in order to be used against you. I think it's crucial that we do that. And I think one of the important things one of the reasons I wanted to set up this channel was that to figure out how we do that. I think as well, I mean, I'll go as far as to say that anything like council tax, anything that we can plausibly withhold from the state is something that we should be doing. This is not advice to anyone in a sense that, you know, if you get locked up for not paying tax or whatever, that's probably not good, and that's up to you if you want to do that. But we need to figure out how to resist this government. So I'm throwing these things open for discussion. Let's discuss them. Let's go into detail about all these things, and things like utility bills. Can we avoid paying them? Because they're a rip-off anyway. They're basically, they're burning, they're setting fire to our treasure in order to facilitate things like fucking wind power, solar power, energy sources which are known to not be viable, in order to basically just fleece us, steal all of our wealth, in order to destroy it so that we can't use it to better our own situations. And that's the world we live in. So yeah, and another one is important as well. And I think it's interesting the fact that, I mean, see when you go through this, you can see parallels. Like we are prisoners of war, and there's a whole lot of gaslight and media and propaganda programming us, and we're all victims of that programming, whether we like it or not, because it's constant, it's everywhere, it's on the phone, it's on your computer, it's on the TV, it's constant. So we need to maintain discipline and morale. And I think that's, I mean, in broad strokes, that's going to be things like staying fit, getting active in your community. That's where maybe politics does come in. Being active at a local level and attempting to influence decisions. Take it away from people who are virtue signalling, like the Green Party, and they want to spend 200 grand on a Pride festival or something like that. These are areas where we can make our voices heard, be just a pain in the backside, basically. Just go there. Because even if we can prevent the government tentacles from functioning correctly, then we're doing good work. The one thing I want to impress to everyone who may be watching this is that the state is our enemy. Anything that is bad for the state is good for you, and vice versa. Anything which is good for the state will be bad for us, and that's the paradigm that we live in. It's what we all need to get our head around. We need to start all understanding this and adjusting our philosophical paradigm. We are under attack. We have been under attack for, I wouldn't even want to speculate how long. From what I can see with the actions, we've been under attack since, at the very least, the end of World War II. If you take nothing else away from this, you're a prisoner of war. We must force our captors to adhere to the Geneva Convention. That is, we need to shout as loud as possible to maintain our rights and that we are treated fairly within the context of being a prisoner of war. We must resist exploitation. We cannot enable foreign businesses and interests. We cannot sell our property to foreigners. We cannot let our property to foreigners. We should not be involved in any occupations which damage our people and which the state can use you for fiat money in order to intimidate, apply state force to your own people. These things are choices, and we should be choosing not to do them. Maintain morale, go to the gym, stay fit, don't become a fat bastard. Stop giving the bastards your money. I think that's all for now. Have a good one, and we'll speak again soon.